Welcome everyone to the Spina Bifida Association of the Carolinas chapter Zoom meeting, A Journey Like No Other. We'll be hosting author Dorothy Hill Baroch to talk about her new book, A Journey Like No Other. We're thrilled that you all could join us. A little bit of housekeeping. We are going to keep everybody on mute until the end when we open up the conversation for questions. So you'll see that if you have a question, please go into the reactions portion of your Zoom and raise your hand, and that will let me know that you have a question, and I'll pick on you. It will send you a message that asks you to unmute, and then you'll be able to ask your question. But until then, we are going to keep everybody on mute. Dorothy, we'd like to thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to host you and to talk about your new book. I read it. I enjoyed it. I knew that I would. We've been longtime family friends, and we're just thrilled that you allowed the Carolina chapter to host you and to have the opportunity to meet some of the participants in your book. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Donna. I'm excited to be here. I'm impressed with the progress that the whole spina bifida community or the disability community has made over the years from the time I first was introduced to it because of the birth of my son Tom. This excitement it's moved me for today to talk about having this situation be more of a Zoom conversation, like people sitting in the living room around the world talking to each other. It's not going to be a formal presentation. I was not comfortable putting together an hour and a half of a speech to give to anybody. But I will start off the evening by sharing some thoughts about why I wrote the book and why I do what I do. As you mentioned, Donna, we're going to be having interviews with different people in the book, and then later on, an opportunity for people to ask questions and hopefully to get some answers to those questions. I wonder if any of you are thinking, why would an 88-year-old woman sit at a computer for hours and days and months on end, researching and writing and interviewing people for a book? Shouldn't she just be sitting in her rocking chair with her knitting needles in hand or relaxing by the pool at one of the fitness centers near her? Well, not really. Because this 88-year-old woman was once a 22-year-old mother who was told to leave her newborn son in the hospital to die. Because throughout this woman's adult life, she encountered numerous parents who had been told the same thing. Because as a 22-year-old, words like spina bifida, hydrocephalus, and ventricular shunts were totally foreign to this young mother. Because this 88-year-old wants to do what she can in her own small way to save other parents from some of the trauma surrounding shunts that stop working in the middle of the night, numerous trips to the hospital for a variety of surgeries, wounds that take forever to heal, and government intervention that can often create more problems than solve them. As that 88-year-old, I've chosen a different role, not just as a parent, but also as a writer. And as a writer, it's not my intention to criticize, but to educate, to stimulate thinking, and hopefully to stimulate positive action. To educate people who don't understand the concept of being ADA compliant. To educate people who still park their cars in the striped portion of the handicap zones, to educate people who manage public bathrooms and other facilities that aren't accessible to people in wheelchairs and walkers, to educate people who express pity to those who they see as disabled. and to remind people, even people in the medical profession, that the newborn child that has a disability deserves the right to live a full life. Yes, some people are nosy, some people are rude, and others are thoughtless when they encounter a person in a wheelchair who is exhibiting some form of disability. But for the disabled person to criticize them weakens their ability to inform those people. Lourdes Mack, one of the people in my book, doesn't criticize. She engages. Lourdes is a 24-year-old woman living in South Carolina who understands the importance of communicating with people who stare at her in her wheelchair. Some people, especially young people, even ask, "What's wrong with you? Why are you in a wheelchair?" Lourdes, tell us how you answer that question.
Hi, I'm Lourdes, as Donna said, or Dorothy said. I'm 24. I live in South Carolina. I'm originally from California. Um, I, like anyone, I introduce myself and I then briefly tell them my story. I tell them that I was born with a birth defect that damaged my spine and that I can't walk so well. Um, and that my wheelchair for me is freedom. It's what allows me to live my life independently. I try and take a direct approach, and allow the person to ask questions. I encourage questions and curiosity, um, especially when it tends to be maybe teenagers or someone who's older. When it comes to little kids, I make it cooler. I pop a cool wheelie, and then suddenly it's not this thing that they are afraid of. It's cool. It's whoa, how did she do that?
I know that you've performed in dance groups, you've acted in television commercials, and even recently you worked at Disneyland. Do you have something new and exciting on your agenda?
Yeah, I have been so busy. Like you said, I worked at Disney last year. I was there working for about 10 months and it was great. I had a great time. It was so much fun. It was crazy, but I loved every second of it. But, now that I'm back, I re-enrolled back in school and I'm getting my associates in business with an emphasis on entrepreneurship. Um, I I was a dancer back in California for I want to say about 6 years. Um, and when I moved down here, I realized when I was in California, I was kind of living in this bubble of opportunity, left and right. There were things to do and just there was so much going on. And when I moved here, I was sort of shocked, like, where did all of those opportunities go? And it was because they just either didn't exist or weren't talked about as much, or the companies that do exist aren't as loud as the ones back home. And so that's what I'm working towards now is my associates in business and emphasis on entrepreneurship because I want to start my own nonprofit dance company for low-income families, primarily with kids with disabilities, um, because I started dancing when I was 13, and I really wish that I had found it sooner. So I want it to be available to more kids um, sooner than it was for me.
What are some of the things that are some of the classes that you're taking that are going to help you create this nonprofit?
Well, right now I'm taking intro to business and intro to marketing, and um, it's all about the the different types of businesses that exist, why they exist, how they function, and um, these first few classes are really the basics of all of it. And the reason I'm taking these courses is because as an artist, I very much, I have experience there. I know how to create a routine. I know um how to read music. I know how to listen to it and count out beats. I know how to work with kids because I've done that before. I know how to work with kids with and without disabilities, um, and adults. I've done that as well. And so, in both of those aspects, I very much feel like I have experience. But when it came to having my own business and actually running it, I realized I have no idea what I'm doing. And I really want it to be successful. I want it to be something that works and has the potential and desire to grow into something really big. And the only way I feel to do that well is to go in as prepared as I can.
Thank you. As a writer who loves words but hates numbers and PR things, I may call on you to do some of the marketing for my books. So thank you for your time.
Of course. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Will Dickey from North Carolina goes beyond the one-on-one approach. His advocacy efforts go beyond the classroom, where he's a teaching assistant for children with special needs. And his involvement then goes to the state and the national level. Will is a founding member of the Spina Bifida Association of the Carolinas, and he's been on its advisory council since its inception in 2012. He's also on the Teal on the Hill, TOTH committee, a project with the Spina Bifida Association of America, began in 2019. The committee initially invited people to meet in person with their Capitol Hill legislators. But after COVID, it was decided, and during COVID, it was decided to have the advocates visit with their legislators virtually via their annual Teal on the Hill meeting. Will you tell us more about some of the results of Teal on the Hill, how many people have participated, et cetera, et cetera? I'll leave it to you.
Well, thank you, Dorothy. I truly appreciate being a part of all this. Well, the great thing about Tea on the Hill, I think, is especially since we started in 2019, that year we were able to do it in person. So I really got to learn, and everyone else got to learn how the sausage is made, so to speak. It's not that glamorous. Some of us were meeting in hallways, custodial closets, things like that. And a lot of the time, you don't get to meet the actual representative. You learn very quickly that Washington is run by staffers who are 20 somethings. They hustle and they meet with many groups like yourself every single day. So they kind of go into it stone faced. So you learn really quick how things are made or the way it's done. So you really truly have a respect for it, I think.
Was it discouraging though, I hadn't thought about that before, when you saw that you rarely met the actual legislator?
Um, At first, yeah, a little bummed, but you realize that you're now in a room with someone who is hopefully constantly taking notes and really listening to what you're saying, and especially if you have someone in your group that's from their district, you can really have some instant influence on the conversation and most importantly, their response.
What kind of feedback do you get?
Um, we More often than not, we have good response. A lot of the staffers I've made relationships with over the years because it's usually the same people, and I'm there every year, so we recognize each other. So you really establish a bond. Like I said, they're young 20 somethings, so they really eager to make their mark. So they really pay attention for the most part, take notes, answer questions. And even if they're blatantly honest and they say, "Well, I don't know anything about spina bifida," that's your opportunity to educate and advocate. So that's when you and everyone else in that meeting can really spring into action and really influence them.
Do you even introduce the question? Like, what do you know about spina bifida? What do you know about hydrocephalus?
Exactly. Before we even ask that, we ask how much time do we have? So
Oh,
because sometimes they're running late, sometimes they, due to logistics, they can't meet with you as allotted. So sometimes it's 30 minutes, which is great, which
mhm.
is standard. But sometimes it's like, well, she's getting ready to vote, so we got to make this quick. So it all just depends. But that's the first question we ask. But we mainly have someone from the main office kind of do an introduction, and
Mm,
which describes what we are, and most importantly, our asks. Depending on what legislation's going on, the asks could vary. But
mhm.
one common ask is every year, so we ask for additional funding or at least stay at our current level for funding for the National Spina Bifida Program and the National Spina Bifida Association.
And are you successful generally, at least getting advances?
I really think we've made an impact. I really, truly do. And I think we have data to prove that, especially when you talk to Sarah. She's always been for this event. This has kind of been her thing during the time she's been here. And, I really think we've done well with just getting our name out there
Mhm.
and making them realize that this is no longer just you know, uh, what's the word? Pediatric condition. There's
Yeah,
more people like myself. We're only getting older and crankier, and most importantly, the disabled vote. This people in the disability community, their vote, takes up a very good chunk of society. So we do have influence. We do have a say at the end of the day.
good, good. This is a big one. I know you have strong feelings
Hmm.
about the healthcare system,
Yes, ma'am.
which in your words is broken. You want to talk
Yes.
about that?
Well, to paint a very broad stroke, because I can go down rabbit holes that will last the entire 90 minutes. Um, we are the only industrialized nation in the world without socialized healthcare. The Nixon administration back in the 1970s learned very quickly that, excuse me, that the medical bills and profession can make a lot of money, and that's the main reason why we're in the mess we're in. That's why we're fighting just to get basic coverage. Uh, Here recently, I'm sure you've heard of the new Medicaid and Medicare requirements. They're requiring certain people to not only prove twice a year that they're still disabled, but work a full-time job, 40 hours a week. So that's just a great example why the system is broken.
Mhm.
And to be very honest with you, uh, you know, people like myself were not very profitable because we actually cost them money. One of our nicknames, our community is we're nicknamed Million Dollar Babies because that's the average medical cost, uh, definitely by, first 5, 10 years, depending on your situation of
Mhm.
how much it costs. For example, I had a bowel obstruction in 2016 and which required multiple surgeries. I was actually in a self-induced coma for a couple days, then had to stay additionally for rehab and everything. And back then, I looked at my insurance and it was a total of $334,000.
Mhm.
So, had I not had the insurance due to the Agent Orange Act, that would have cost us out of pocket nearly $350,000. That's another reason.
Yeah,
It it's broken. That's why.
it's big business.
Yeah, exactly. It's capitalism.
Mhm.
It's how you make money. And they'll lose money on me. That's why insurance companies love young 20 somethings because they're healthy. They're not afraid to do crazy things like parkour or whatever, climb mountains, hike in dangerous, but because they're relatively healthy.
Mhm. Just as an aside, and we don't want to get into this too much more deeply, but
Hmm.
I occasionally, because of the insurance that fortunately I have that supports or is secondary to Medicare, I occasionally get checks back from
Hmm.
my insurance company.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
anytime I tell anybody that, they look at me like, oh, she's making that up. I'm not. But it depends on, again, as you said, on the system and how we can work it.
I
And
mean, yeah, and for me personally, the main reason, no lie, I'm working in the public school system. It's not for the pay. It's because of the health benefits, because I get state
yeah,
health care benefits.
yes.
That currently is 70/30. So that on top of the VA insurance I have due to the Agent Orange Act, I've
Mhm.
been very, very fortunate. So
Well,
but you see GoFundMe's on social media all the time. That's the norm. So yeah, you see it every day.
mhm. After Ed left the corporate world, he worked for a community college.
Hmm.
And that's what allows what I just said to happen.
Yeah.
Because we were at the state level when we decided to leave the Northwest and
Hmm.
move to Nevada, we were able to bring it with us. Had we not been, we'd have probably, I'd still be in the Northwest.
Yeah.
But anyway, if is there anything else that you want to add, or shall we move on?
We shall move on. Thank you for everything, Mom.
Oh, I love it. It's so nice to see your face instead of all of those little letters on the text things.
Yes. Feel the same way.
Okay. Um, is Sonja Baker on?
Yes, I am, Dorothy.
Hi, how are you, Sonja?
I'm good.
Good. I'm going to give you a little introduction.
Okay.
Uh, Sonja's a 55-year-old resident of Colorado. She was born with spina bifida and hydrocephalus. And from 2023 to late 2024, she spent almost 2 years in multiple rehab facilities. This goes back to some of what we were discussing with Will about the medical system. Um, Even though she was frustrated and sometimes angry with the inefficiency she experienced, Sonja stuck with it. She advocated for herself. She continued with the prescribed therapy, and she was eventually released. Now she carries on with past interests that and has begun new ones. So then will you tell us about your interest in outdoor activities in Colorado? You do some fun things.
Yeah, speaking of what Will said, 20-year-olds do hiking and all that. Well, I'm pretty much one of those 20-year-olds. I don't consider myself 55, so yeah, I back in 19, I got involved with a nonprofit organization called the Lockwood Foundation. And what they do is they have these trail riders where they help individuals that can't go on trails, very difficult trails by themselves. They take them in these trail riders to where they can go on trails that aren't easy to go on themselves. And
Mhm.
then they also do 14ers. They do Mount Pikes Peak and Mount Elbert, and they do that in August and September. But that's one of the nonprofits that I'm a part of, and because of them, they relocated in 23 back up north to Denver area because Jeff's roommate was from overseas. So she moved back. She had CP and she moved back overseas with her family. So I back in 23 before I got sick, a trail committee was formed out at it's called Red Canyon Park.
Mhm.
They made a trail that's adaptable for everybody to use. people with disabilities or people who just can't walk very well. So anyway, I have been working on to get a track chair program going in Canyon, and we did a survey for Fremont County here in southern Colorado anyway, to see what interest there would be in getting a track chair program going. And we got a huge response, great responses from many people of the area that would love to see a track chair program. And
Who,
yeah,
who is the we who did the survey?
well, the residents of Fremont County, Dorothy, the people who live in Fremont County, like the
Mm-hmm.
elderly, because Fremont County is Round Canyon and Florence. It's considered retirement area, so there's a lot of elderly down here, and not all elderly are for it, but there are some that are for it. And I did a research last fall because I was sent a grant to fill out for getting a track chair program and had help with that grant. Anyway, the research I did on finding out how many people with disabilities live in Fremont County is well over 13% uh, of people that have disabilities in Fremont County. So,
So if there were people in other counties or people in other states who want to introduce this program, would you be willing to talk with them about how to do the research, how to come up with the figures that make a difference?
yes, I
So,
would be.
so people could contact you. You're open to that, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And when I say we're trying to work to get a chair program in Fremont County, it's not just for the locals, but we want people who visit Fremont County, like Canyon City has the Royal Gorge and
Mhm.
all, and um, we want visitors who come to visit Fremont County to be able to enjoy seeing the different trails around Canyon. Like I went out of town for a week in May, uh, and anyway, before that, we were uh, able to get a track chair for about 3 weeks down here from the guy who brought the ones last summer down here for us to try. Anyway, he brought a new one down for us to try, and I got to try this one trail called Tunnel Drive, and that was pretty awesome actually.
Mhm.
I had done it before, but it was in a chariot because it's not an accessible trail. So
Mhm.
anyway, it was very awesome because it's got three caves you go through, and then you get towards the end and it's real rocky and all, and
Mhm.
that's a little discouraging because yeah, you can't really get to the edge because if you get to the edge, you can overlook the
Well,
Arkansas River.
if people, again, from other counties or other states want to get this information, to
Hmm.
bring in programs related to how many people are disabled in their area, you'll be willing to talk with them. And so I will ask them or talk with them about the possibility of connecting with you. Do I have your permission to do that?
Definitely. Yeah,
Good,
I'm
good.
open to this a lot. And especially Fremont County, there's some things that I just don't understand. We've been fighting to get a new pool here in Canyon. Anyway, it got totally turned down, so it's no longer a possibility to have a pool in Canyon City
Mhm.
anymore.
Okay. Well, thank you for the time. Thank you for being available. And
Mhm.
we're going to move on to another folk person.
Okay.
Okay. And if people want to contact you, how about my opening myself for them? They can get in touch with me, and
Yeah,
then I'll pass them on to you.
that's perfectly fine.
Good. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Beth Bryant is our next visitor. She's like an Energizer bunny. She's busy with church activities with her Spina Bifida chapter and working with the committee that sponsors a special evening for people with disabilities. Beth was also selected to be Miss Wheelchair America in 2017, and she eventually began to coordinate the program in 2018. Like many people in the Spina Bifida world, her parents were told shortly after their daughter was born that she probably wouldn't live more than 24 hours. Now, 58 years later, she continues to prove the doctors wrong. Beth, will you tell us a little bit about the Night to Shine program? What does it take to put on one of these events? How much does it cost, et cetera, et cetera?
Um, Hello, everyone. The Night to Shine is an event that the Tim Tebow started with his foundation, and our church is a hosting church of that. And there has to be somebody, obviously, that coordinates that, and I am actually the coordinator for that program. And it takes a lot of people to put this event on. We had about 165 guests, I do believe, this year in February. It's always February, uh, always the Friday before Valentine's Day, unless Valentine's Day falls on Friday, and then it's the Friday before. It's strictly for people with disabilities, um, and it's 14 years and older. Our oldest person that comes every year is in their 80s, and they always are looking for. Actually, they've already started calling me and asking me when our next one is. But again, the event, it takes a lot of people to put it on. So we have a karaoke room. We have dancing in the gym with food, and that food has to be a specialized food for different diets. So we have to make sure we have gluten free, we have sugar free, we have dairy free, throughout the buffet that we fix for that. And I have a group of women that help me with that. So that takes place in 2 days. We get all that taken care of. And then we have a caregiver room that our caregivers and our volunteers can go and eat. And that's a separate spread of food that I fixed for that night as well. And we had to have a quiet room for people that get overstimulated. So in that quiet room, we make sure that we have puzzles and fidgets and with low lighting and very soft music. And we usually have a service dog on hand as well that can go into that room too.
Okay. If people in other parts of the world, not world, the other parts of the United States would want to do this, is this a national program, or how would they connect?
It is actually international.
Mm.
There was, I forget how many churches, but I've talked to pastors that were in Kenya that did it. I've talked to pastors that was in Guatemala and did it. So it's across the nation, our whole United States, and across the world, that this event is put on.
Okay. If a particular area, if it's new to them, could someone contact you and find out how to make it happen?
Sure.
And
Sure.
okay. Tell me a little bit too about the Miss Wheelchair America. How did you fund it? How did you even get involved in it?
Well, the Miss Wheelchair Kentucky, we are part of Miss Wheelchair America, and Miss Wheelchair Kentucky. I competed 2 years. I competed for the for the title in 2016, and then also again in 17. In 16, I actually was hosting a party and was getting phone calls nominating me to compete. And I didn't really have time to think about it. And I kept telling these people, okay, I'll call you back. So I competed and I was runner up. The next year, I became Miss Wheelchair Kentucky, and I put 38 1,000 miles on my car traveling the state of Kentucky that year and advocating, um, educating people about disabilities and making their establishments accessible to advocating to bring the change as well. So,
Did you did you have to fund that yourself?
Yes.
And how
Yes.
did you do that?
I did that by I was making jewelry at the time, and I would set up a jewelry booth anywhere that I could possibly set one up. I also did several bake sales. I also, a lot of the speaking engagements I had would usually give me some money for coming as a donation. So it kind of, it just happened. I don't know how else to put it, but it just kind of happened by the way the things that I was doing. So, and when I would go to certain areas of Kentucky, like Paducah, I've got a good friend that lives in Paducah. So I was in Paducah several times. And whenever I'd go there, I would stay with her. So I didn't have to worry about a hotel or
Mhm.
anything like that. So, uh, but now at the end of my reign, I was asked to become the state coordinator or to apply for the job to be the state coordinator by the current coordinator at the time. And I did, and they accepted my application. And here I am now, 9 years later, coordinating the program and currently working on our next competition that we are actually adding the little girls in the mix. So we're adding the littles and the preteens and the teens and the older teens into the
Mhm.
mix. So
That does a lot for self-confidence, doesn't it? Especially for the children.
yes, yes.
Hmm.
And we're
Hmm.
just trying to get them kind of engaged in the program so that when they become 21 years of age, then they can compete on the level of being Miss Wheelchair Kentucky. So, uh,
Hmm.
and they have to go to nationals every year. So, trying to make sure that that title holder funds or raises money to be able to go to nationals. Some of them are able to do it very quickly. Other ones have a harder time. The one thing I've learned, the people that live in the smaller communities of Kentucky, they usually have their whole town behind them and the funding just happens for them. So, which is good.
Good,
So,
good. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
no problem. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Arizona resident Jay Dashefsky believes that legislation impacts everyone. His experience with advocacy groups began when he was a sophomore at Arizona State University. Jay was invited to join a research project that consisted of a group of self-advocates with disabilities. His involvement led to more networking and participation in other advocacy groups, and he was hooked. And I don't see Jay. Is he present?
Yes, I'm here.
Good to see you.
Great to see you too.
It was strange to speak to an empty
Oh,
computer screen.
oh
Okay,
well.
and tell us about some of this advocacy work that you do and how I want you to encourage people.
Yes, yes. So I'm gonna probably not go like within the timeline within the chronological timeline because the networking really came first. I got involved in a research project where we got to know more about self-advocacy, more about like how does it apply to all over the place, to the entire world, to everybody's life. No two people are alike, whether they have the same disabilities or not. So it's going to apply differently. Where I was at the time was I was at ASU. So in college and university climates, self-advocacy definitely applies. You're a lot more on your own than you are in high school. So you have to schedule your own appointments, get your own accommodations. That's what advocacy is. Advocacy is speaking up for your wants, for your needs, um, no matter how urgent they are, no matter like if they're sort of further in the future, if they're like right in front of your face, I need accommodations. Where do I go? What do I do? If it's hot outside, I need a glass of water. Where do I go for that? So being in Arizona, advocacy is right there. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, so then that led to more networking, and the networking expanded greatly as I went further into graduation. So I got to go into more self-advocacy groups and more and more and more.
Mhm.
Um, and as we went from there, we learned of what we could do. We learned that there were larger issues that required what was called a legislative change. Legislative, I use the mnemonic device as L for legislation means local. So legislative is local. Congress is more federal. And as Will spoke to it's a really great experience as well. So that's still on the Hill. But when it comes to the local, at the time we were faced with legislation that would change the state statutes. The statutes are within the state constitution. So how do we change and not use the R word anymore? Um, and so we were in this group and we were assigned, like, do you want to go to testify? Do you want to go to testify? At the time, I had been involved in a few different groups where we did go to the state legislature, the Arizona State Capitol. Um, and I got to see the ins and outs, the basic ins and outs of what goes on there, how to really get in there, but not completely how to get things going. So I was like, could I testify? I didn't know I could do this. I thought it was more of the dare I say, elites, those that, specifically held jobs to do this. And so like everybody is a citizen lobbyist. You don't have to be like a lobbyist per se, like ones that's paid that you get paid for. Everybody is a citizen lobbyist. And so how legislation like means a lot to everybody is because um what if you experience changes in the workforce, changes in how services are delivered, changes in your local streets, your local public transportation, your local this that. Those come from legislative actions, most likely.
Mhm.
So when I got to go testify in a group, I was like, wow, I can really do this. And that's how I learned more and more and more. At the time, I didn't know how to get legislation up and running off the ground. But later on, as it was, getting people to know that within Arizona, spina bifida is not a developmental disability. It is federally, but not the state. So that's where I got to experiment. I got to go down to the legislature and ask about like, how do we get this going? I want to educate people about spina bifida. I want to get this legislation going. So I went there with the executive director, and we did get it going. Did it cross the finish line? No. However, that's not the downside because we got to educate lots of people, and that continues. So that's really the greatest thing about advocacy.
When you said you get to educate lots of people, which people are you talking about?
Yes, yes. So the legislators, like for example, your elected officials, they are there to learn. They don't know everything right off the bat. So that's where the constituents, that's where all of you come in, and you get to come in to educate people and teach them about the issues that you are passionate about, that you would like them to be passionate about. I remember when the Spina Bifida bill did hit one of the floor sessions. There was one legislator that said, "I want to explain my vote." There's lots of constituents I know in my district that have spina bifida, and that's why I vote yes. So when you say you're a constituent, that means you're in their legislative district. So that's your opportunity to educate them, to call them up on the phone or to email them or both. Schedule appointments to go down there and talk about what issues are on your mind. What do you want to see as changes? Um, and like how to elicit those changes too. Um, definitely doing research too, so that you could educate them more because they might not have the research right then and there. So you help them out with that as well.
Were you generally well received?
Yes, yes, yes. Definitely. I was, and that owes a lot to like when it comes to advocacy and self-advocating, you want to cast a wide net. You want to spread the word to others, and really build a coalition in that way. That's where networking also comes in too. The well-received part also comes to strategizing as well. Not really being like a really loud megaphone all the time, but also like sort of in a way keeping your head down and knowing when to do so. Because when you're at the legislature, you're surrounded by all sides, Republicans, Democrats, independents, etc. So believe it or not, they are willing to hear from you. I've met with both sides. They don't shoot you down at all. They point you in the right directions because they do hear you out. That's my experience. Now, with keeping your head down, does it always work? Well, if something is very, very urgent, such as healthcare, very urgent, it might not always work. So you do want to be vocal as possible, but therein lies that dichotomy of being vocal and also um, allowing time to do research, allowing time, buying time to build rapport with everybody around so that they want to keep on working with you. You don't push anybody away. You get to educate people no matter what side they're on. You get to work with people no matter what side they're on. And so they're going to always remember you. They're going to want to ask you back.
Mhm.
So that is what I say is huge as well.
Yes. My minimal experience with the legislature in the state of Nevada is to be persistent. I remember sending a note to one of the people here, and I got what was really rather a perfunctory, I'm sure it was a cut and paste response. But I didn't stop there. I continued, and now I get more personal responses from her. And in fact, it's I won't go into all my story, but it's being persistent. If you believe, if you have passion, if you have dedication, if you have the data, the background, they'll eventually listen to you. You just have to keep knocking at the door.
Definitely. It's being persistent and also like keeping your emotions in check at the time too, like not
Yes.
getting too hard, not going too hard. You want that response inhibition, you want that emotional regulation, um because then they're still going to want to work with you in the future. What if something comes up that's a whole different issue altogether?
Mhm.
What if there's certain legislators that like that might not be their issue, but they know who to point out to, they know who to refer you to, they can do
Yes,
that.
yes, yes. Jay, thank you for what you do, and thank you for the time today.
Well, thank
I
you for having me.
Okay, good. We'll talk another time, maybe.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
There were four of the people in the book were not able to participate in our mini Q&A sections, but I've included below, or I'm including a short overview of their chapters. Now, I'm not sure how to jump into this next spot. Donna, maybe you can help me.
My pleasure, Mom. Yes, you're correct. We looked to make sure Brendan wasn't able to join us at the last minute, but
Yes.
so we'd like to open up this opportunity for people to ask questions. I just have one or two that I'd like to ask first. Your book is called A Journey Like No Other: Stories of Hardship, Persistence, and Purpose. As a mother of a son with spina bifida, where did you see your persistence and purpose raising a son with spina bifida?
In the doctor's offices. They, to be honest, some of them were resistant to helping because they didn't have information.
Mhm.
60 some years ago, when Tom was born, there was no Spina Bifida Association of America. There weren't individual organizations that could influence and educate people in the medical profession. And my understanding was that they had very little information given to them when they were going through their medical training. But it goes back to what I just said to Jay. It's persistence is important and advocacy is important. This was my child. I was not going to take a no. And if the physician could not assist, I don't want to say fire him or her, but I would just move on, and see what we could find. And inevitably we did find people who were helpful, even willing to try some things that were different for them. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. It's perfect. And so, not being an author myself, somebody who has never had a published work, I don't know what goes into the thought process of creating a book, coming up with the idea. So can you give me an idea, please? What, again, going back to Tom and being the mother of somebody who had spina bifida, how did that shape you as an author and wanting to write a book like this? Or was it just something completely different?
Say that differently.
I apologize. That as
No,
I was
that's all
saying
right.
it did not, it didn't even sound right to me. So I'm just wondering, was it because you had a child with spina bifida, a disabled child, that made you want to be an author? And if so, what was it about that? Or was it something else that made you want to write this book? That's what I'm trying to ask you.
Okay.
I should have written that down. My
That's
apologies.
right. That's right. You have two questions there.
Yes, two.
What made me want to be an author stemmed from the fact that I did a lot of nonprofit work and did a great deal of grant writing. So I was involved in a sense, technical writing. And I got to the point then where I just felt something growing inside me that wanted to be expressed. And it actually, I'm the author of 4 books, two of which are related to how do I want to say it? Not just the disability world, but a world where challenges are met. So not everybody in this book or the previous one were people in the disability world. Anyway, I was passionate about a particular issue related to church autonomy. And I won't go into all that right now, but I remember writing the book from the passion that I felt. I took it to my friend who was also a writer, and I said, "What can I do with this?" She said, "I think you better revise it because I'm sure nobody will buy it. It's too strong. The opinions are too strong." So I learned about that. There's a constant revision in my thinking and learning from other people who were authors. I joined groups, writers groups where I was given additional information. I'm generally pretty good as far as I think I'm very good actually, as far as the English punctuation, grammar, that kind of thing. But the technical part, what do you do with a book? How do you get it published? Do you go to an organization that's been in business for years, or do you do self-publishing? I mean, if there are steps that were thrown in front of me, I guess I would say, because it wouldn't have known to ask the questions. So there we are with the book. The idea of writing a book. It scared me at first. I thought, why should I spend all this time? Who's going to read it? Whatever. And the first 2 that I wrote were relatively well received, but this one, what started book number 3, Well, it was interesting. There was a woman, I won't use names and such, but she was the daughter of a man who had spina bifida. He lived to be 90 some years old, 93, I believe. And she wanted to honor him, to acknowledge the fact that he worked through these problems for such a long period of time with very little additional assistance. This woman found Tom's name somewhere on the internet and saw his involvement with spina bifida. She asked what she could do, how she could make her father's situation evident and again known to other people. And Tom said, "Well, my mother is just starting to write a book. why don't I connect you to her?" And so there were all of those kinds of constant kinds of incidents that I think were important for me to recognize that this is a gift I have.
Mhm.
And it's important for me to use this to the best advantage of other people. I'm a nonfiction writer. I don't do fiction. One of the books I wrote had a segment in it that was fictional, but the point was evident. Uh, does that answer?
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. So I'd like to ask if anybody has questions that they'd like to ask Dorothy. Please, two options. Either use the reactions to raise your hand or turn on your camera and just raise your hand and I will try and find you as quickly as possible. So, well, it doesn't look like, unless I'm missing somebody, I'm going to take a couple friends off of mute just in case I'm missing anybody and they can let me know. But what I'm going to do right now, everyone, is share my screen and show you how you can purchase Dorothy's book. If you will just give me 1 second, I will pull it up. Mom, can you see my screen?
I can see a portion of
The book,
yes,
yeah? All right, here we go.
not the how-to, but just the
Yes,
cover.
there we go. All right, so is that clear now?
Yes.
Okay, so everyone, here are the options. We have a QR code for you, or you can purchase the book on Amazon, Books A Million, or booklocker.com.
I did see, before you put this up, I did see Nikti's name popped up. I wondered if she had question.
Let's see. Give me 1 moment to find her. I don't see her hand up.
Okay.
Yes. So I think we're good there.
I think it was in the chat.
Okay.
In the chat. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you, Jess. Let me get back, jump into the chat. And there we go. All right. So Nikti, what's your question, please? Let me take you off mute. Ooh, there's too many screens. Okay. Just gonna put this down for just a second so I can find this again. Oh dear. Bear with me, everyone.
Hey everybody, I don't know how to place my camera, but
That's okay.
it's so great to see you. I have a question for Dorothy. My question is, how can you continue to be a supportive mom of a young adult with the spina bifida, knowing the challenges that they face, but at the same time, give them the room they need to be adults?
That's a whole book in itself, I think. But I think respect that is something that's important to share. They need to respect you and the fact that you're interested in helping them, but only when they ask for help. You know, you're talking young adults, I assume. But with my kids, and in fact, I'll just go back a little bit of a step. I remember talking to Tom and offering motherly advice, I guess. And he was very gracious, very kind, and said to me, thank you. I appreciate the information you want to give me, but Mom, I can take care of it myself. If I can't, I will ask you for help. And I think maybe you can establish that kind of communication system, if you will, between your child and yourself. Just sit down and have a conversation with them and say, I want to help you. I want to be supportive of you, but I don't want to interfere in your life. Ask me for help and I'll give it, but I won't run over you, so to speak. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's helpful. Thank you so much. Is anyone else, adults who have a spina bifida, have an advice in this situation?
Give me just one moment and I will check and see if anybody has their hands up and then I can unmute them.
Will?
Oh, okay, give me 1 second, Will, to find you. Oh, this is taking me a minute. You're hiding from me, Will. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
There we go, my friend. Thank you.
All right. Um, I think when it comes down to it, and I've always said this, is one of the best things my parents ever did for me was, they let me fail because I'm extremely stubborn. And at the end of the day, they're ultimately going to have to learn to take care of themselves. So, there was times where I probably should have started taking my Cipro a couple days before I finally went to the ER and admitted, yeah, I've got a UTI. So, and it's just some things you got to go through, or oh, I should have packed more supplies on this trip, kind of thing. But I agree with Dorothy. It's about communication, and especially later on in my teenage years with my father, we had a good rapport. And his main thing was, I respect you, just don't have the law call me, So there was an understanding, even though he was in the military. But yeah, I've always definitely considered him a best friend, especially in my later years now. So that's how I would do it. Just establish a rapport and respect.
From a parent standpoint, I can remember watching Tom get on a bus to go from Albany, Oregon to Reno, Nevada to start his first year at UNR. I was terrified from the parent standpoint. What's going to happen to him? Is he going to have this problem, that problem, or whatever? But it wasn't my place to show him that fear. I had to kind of hold that within. And the interesting thing was, after he had been there, I don't know, a couple of months maybe, got a phone call from Tom. And he said, guess what I just did? I said, I don't know. You tell me. He and a couple of people had rappelled down a mountain. A little mountain, not a big, maybe a hill, but he had rappelled down that. And I thanked him for not telling me beforehand. But he did it. He proved to himself, and certainly to me and his father as well, that he was capable of meeting a challenge. But so if from a parental standpoint, it's important to hold back some of your emotion. Let the person, as you said, communicate with them and respect them. Respect is a big one.
Beth, give me 1 moment.
Hmm?
There we go. Beth has something that she'd like to say.
As an adult with spina bifida, both my parents are gone, but my dad was my main person that was my supporter as a parent. And he, anytime that he was afraid, he wouldn't necessarily tell me that he was afraid that maybe I'd get hurt. For an example, he would always encourage me to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. But in the years of growing up, he also taught me to advocate for myself, especially going to doctor's appointments. I am very good about staying on top of my health. Um, Recently, dealt with some issues, and it ended up being kidney stones that I was dealing with. And the doctor that I went to knew all about spina bifida, which made me feel really good. But in turn, this doctor said, even though you are the age you are, you have been well educated to know about your health. And I go back to my dad with that. From the day I was born, he fought for me, telling the doctors to do the surgery to keep me alive. And again, I'm 58 years old now, and I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for my dad.
Yep.
I'm gonna.
Excuse me.
No, please, Mom, you first.
I remember a conference that I went to, a mother and her teenage daughter, or I guess the young woman was closer to maybe being 20, thereabouts. But the mom had started when the girl was like 12, 10, 12, bringing the child with her to the medical, to the physicians, so she could teach the daughter how to advocate. The daughter was the one with a disability. And how do you advocate? What are the questions you ask the doctor? How do you work with prescriptions, et cetera, et cetera? So she trained her child to advocate for herself. Advocacy doesn't just appear. You have to learn how to do it, as Jay mentioned earlier. And oftentimes, parents can help their child. They can help themselves. If they know their child's able to take care of themselves, it's going to be a relief in the parents' older years. So that's just a little aside I thought might be helpful.
I was going to put in my 2 cents. It's a little hard for me because I've just lost my mother. So both my parents are gone now. I'm 50 years old. And I had wonderful parents. I will defend them till the day I die. They were great parents. But I had parents that were the exact opposite of the advice that you're getting, Nikti. My parents did everything for me. And they were they set up my doctor's appointments. They decided when I was having surgery. I didn't get any input. It was, you're going to do this. This is what needs to be done. And they were doing what was best for me. But I didn't learn to advocate for myself. I learned to be quiet, listen to the doctors, let them be the boss. And it was, I also, in my personal life, graduated high school and went off and didn't know how to drive, didn't know how to wash my own clothing, didn't know how to cook, because my family had done everything for me. But at the same time, I had a father who was a World War II veteran, a mother who was a prisoner of war in World War II, and they had very different personalities. But my dad's personality was can do. You can do anything you set your mind to. You have to work to get what you want. Life doesn't hand you everything that you need, despite them handing me everything that I needed. My father's personality rubbed off on me a lot more, and I learned that I had to learn how to advocate for myself. I learned how to do my own laundry. I still don't cook, have no interest in it, but that's now a choice. But all of these things that they didn't do for me hurt me later in life. And I also made really bad life decisions when it came to my health. I would wait so long to go to the doctor if I had a problem because I knew that they were just going to take over and make all the decisions for me. And so I really had a lot of growing up to do, and there's still some life skills that I'm not great at. And it was because I was not given the opportunity to learn those life skills, to be that advocate, to ask questions. And so the advice that you're getting from everybody else is such great advice. And that is actually the advice I give people now without telling my story this way. I never tell my story this way, but that's because it feels like I'm ratting my parents out and or talking ill of them. And that's just not the case. They were such great parents. But in the end, my life suffered for it. And and so that's my advice is to listen to them because this is the flip side of it. Sonja, I'm getting ready to ask you to go on to unmute.
Yeah, I just wanted to share my story a little bit. Um, from the time I was a little girl, my parents both taught me how to be very self-sufficient for myself. Um, as most of us as adults, I think our dads were mostly our supporters, because our moms are hard to, they don't want to let go of what, you know, being the caregiver. Because my mom never worked out of the house, so she was my main caregiver because my dad was gone a lot working and all. And, but as I got older, and I think what really helped me grow out of, I was a shy, very shy little girl when I was little, and anyway, when we moved to a big city like Denver, it really opened me up. And I learned that I had to start learning how to do things for myself because I knew as all parents get older and we won't have them around anymore, we have to eventually learn how to do for ourselves some way or another. So, I still battle at times with my mom, but she has learned to give me my space. But when I do need her help, I do ask her. So, but yeah, it's a challenge, I think, more for moms than it is dads to let go. As I said, my mom never worked out, so yeah, she was, my main caregiver, and then when I went off to college, that was a real shock to her system because she wanted me to stay at home, but that wasn't my plan. I wanted to go off to college and get that experience, and that's why I am where I am today because I had that experience of being independent in college, and I was probably too much of a social butterfly, but I just liked getting to know people. I did study though. I did study. So, um, but anyway, I just think that as we get older, we definitely know we are gonna have to be self-reliant on ourselves, and that's what's helped me get where I am today. So yeah.
Thank you.
Donna, I think there was a
I'm
question for you. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Jessica, what was that?
There was a question for you from Nick D in the comments. It
Okay.
says, how did you become to be the great independent advocate that you are now?
Thank you. Again, it still was my dad's attitude of can do, and where there's a will, there's a way. And I realized with my family being on Guam and when I was in the States and I was going to doctor's appointments more and more without them, that I was going to have to speak up if I that's why sometimes you just see me railing on Facebook about this resident who treated me like I'm an idiot and this doctor who tried to tell me I didn't know anything about spina bifida. I understood at that point, learning the hard way, Nikki, that I had to speak up or these doctors were going to railroad right over me. But again, my father's attitude, I have very outspoken, very independent sisters. I'm the baby of 5 girls that being around them also showed me that I needed to speak up and that it's not in my nature to be shy for those of you that know me. So it came about, but it came about slowly. And I think that it came about having to learn the hard way, but also just knowing that I wasn't going to let my spina bifida dictate when I was healthy what I was going to do and what I wasn't going to do. And going back to Tom again, I was living in Colorado for a short amount of time working on a congressional campaign, and we lost. And we were so sad. And we just couldn't figure out what we were going to do to get over this. And one of the people that I worked with said, there's only one thing to do. You go skydiving. That's how we're getting over this. And so we all went, let's go skydiving. But I knew I handled it the way Tom did. I went skydiving with my friends, had a blast, and then I called my parents and told them what I had done. And my mother, I told her, and it was funny because I said, Mommy, guess what I just did? And she said, what did you do? And I said, I just went skydiving with my friends. It was the only way that we could get over this loss. And my mother said to me, your aunts and I are going to lunch. We're going to be, I wish you were here. It's going to be a great lunch, but I'll be thinking of you. That's how my mother answered I just went skydiving.
Ignored it.
Yes, just like it never happened. And then about 2 years later, she went, did you really go skydiving? And I said, yes. Would you like to see the pictures? Yeah, so that's how it happened. Like these slowly, my parents were setting a good example for me. They just didn't realize it, but it happened slowly.
I have something that I'd like to read. May I do that?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. This is it's in the book, but I'm going to read it anyway. It's written by George Chanos, one of the Nevada state's attorneys. He's become a Facebook friend and fascinating man. This was his comment that he wanted to see published. Choose your journey wisely. As a 6-year-old boy, I wanted and expected to change the world by becoming president. I discarded that ambition long ago, later discarding the practice of law and the quest for money, prestige, and possessions. I've found peace and joy in doing so. I'm on a very different and far more fulfilling journey now, one that is self-transcendent, free of life's strife, less burdened by my own wants, needs, and desires, and more importantly, one of contribution and reflection, one that welcomes aging, spiritual growth, and deeper meaning. There are many forms of currency in life that can enrich you: the love of your partner, your family, and your friends, the smiles and thanks of others whose lives you touch, the smiles and thanks of other individuals, the growth you see in others that you've helped and enriched, a deeper understanding of the world around you and yourself, and a wonderful sense of peacefulness and contentment that comes from being mindful and grateful. Sometimes we need to listen less to the noise that surrounds us and more to our inner voice. Sometimes making it less about you actually does more for you. We all have to find our own way in life. We all have to make the most of our one and only life. And we have infinite options and opportunities to do that. It's all about reflection and choice. To be happy, you have to choose to be happy. Reflect on the life you want for yourself and choose wisely. You don't depend on the world around you to make you happy.
I think that's a wonderful way to end our session. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Dorothy, thank you for sharing your wonderful book with us. Again, in the chat is where you can find the information to order the book. We, on behalf of the Spina Bifida Association of the Carolinas chapter, we hope that you all enjoyed your time. Thank you so much for joining us. We wish you a wonderful night. And Dorothy, thank you for sharing this wonderful story with us, but also for sharing the stories of those of us in the community. We greatly appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.